In the heart of Igboland, in what is now modern-day Nigeria, the early 20th century was a time of immense change. Colonial powers were reshaping the landscape, and ancient traditions were colliding with new world orders. It was in this turbulent era that an extraordinary woman rose from the margins of society to become a king. This is the incredible story of Ahebi Ugbabe, the female king of Igboland. Her story begins not with privilege, but with peril. Born in the late 19th century in a small village, Ahebi's life took a dramatic turn when her family faced a crisis. To atone for a crime committed by her father, she was offered as a living sacrifice to a deity. But Ahebi was not one to accept a fate dictated by others. In a breathtaking act of defiance, she fled. She escaped her village, her family, and the sentence that had been passed upon her, embarking on a long and arduous journey north. This journey led her to the Igala kingdom, a neighboring territory with a different language and different customs. Alone and far from home, Ahebi had to be resourceful to survive. She learned the Igala language, adapted to their ways, and eventually found work. But she wasn't just surviving. She was observing. She watched the complex systems of trade, politics, and power that operated around her. It was during this time that she began to trade, using her sharp intellect and growing understanding of regional commerce to build a small business. Her business savvy was remarkable. She traded in goods like palm oil and horses, navigating the intricate trade routes that crisscrossed the region. Her travels brought her into contact with a new and powerful force, the British colonial administrators who were extending their influence. Unlike many who saw them as foreign invaders, Ahebi saw an opportunity. She learned their language, English, and began to act as a crucial intermediary between them and the local Nigerian communities. Her ability to bridge these cultural and linguistic divides made her invaluable. The British relied on her insights and her ability to negotiate with local leaders. Over time, she amassed not just wealth from her trading, but significant political influence. She was no longer the runaway girl sentenced to die. She was a powerful woman, a force to be reckoned with. After years in exile, Ahebi Ugbabe made a triumphant return to her home village of Igboland. But she didn't come back as a fugitive seeking forgiveness. She returned as a wealthy, influential figure with the backing of the British colonial power. Her return sent shockwaves through the community that had once cast her out. The very people who had condemned her now saw a woman of immense power and authority. The British, seeking to establish their system of indirect rule, needed local leaders to enforce their policies. In Igboland, the existing leadership was resistant. Seeing this, Ahebi used her political acumen and her relationship with the British to her advantage. She positioned herself as the perfect candidate to bring order and facilitate colonial administration. In an unprecedented move, the British appointed her as a warrant chief, a position of local authority. But Ahebi's ambition didn't stop there. She wasn't content to be just a chief. She aimed for the highest position of power in her community, a position that had been exclusively held by men for centuries, the title of Ez or king. Using her wealth, her influence, and her sheer force of will, she challenged the traditional patriarchal structures of Igbo society. She argued that her power, her leadership, and her ability to bring prosperity to her people made her worthy of the title. It was a radical, revolutionary idea. A woman becoming king was simply unheard of. But Ahebi was persuasive. She performed the necessary rituals, paid the required tributes, and leveraged her political connections. In the end, she achieved the impossible. Ahebi Ugbabe was crowned the Ez, the king of Igboland. She donned the male ceremonial attire, adopted the male title, and ruled as a man, a female king. As king, Ahebi's rule was transformative. She was a strong and often authoritarian leader. She established her own court, settled disputes, and enforced colonial policies, including the collection of taxes. She continued her trading enterprises, bringing even more wealth and prestige to her community. She introduced new crops and used her power to protect her people from rival communities. She also dramatically challenged gender roles. As king, she took wives, a symbolic act that was traditionally the sole right of powerful men. These were not romantic partnerships in the modern sense. They were strategic alliances and a demonstration of her status. She effectively married women into her household, giving them a level of freedom and protection they might not have had otherwise. These women worked her lands and businesses, contributing to her economic power. Ahebi's reign was a complex balancing act. She was a product of the colonial system, and her power was deeply intertwined with the British presence. She used this power to break traditional Igbo barriers, but she also helped enforce the colonial agenda. This made her a controversial figure. Some saw her as a progressive and powerful leader who brought stability and wealth. Others viewed her as a tyrant and a puppet of the British, someone who had betrayed their traditions for personal gain. One of the most significant challenges to her authority came from the masquerade cults. In Igbo culture, masquerades are not just performances. They are sacred traditions, physical manifestations of spiritual beings, and an important part of male social and political power. Women were strictly forbidden from knowing the secrets of the masquerade or from creating their own. In a bold and to many sacrilegious move, Ahebi decided to create her own masquerade. She wanted to solidify her power in the spiritual realm, just as she had in the political one. She unveiled her personal mask, an act that directly confronted the core of male authority in her society. This was a step too far for many. It was seen as an abomination, a profound disrespect to the ancestors and the spiritual order. The community rose up in protest. The elders and other leaders declared that her actions had brought a curse upon the land. The opposition was so fierce that her reign began to crumble. The very power she had fought so hard to build was now threatened by a deep cultural and spiritual backlash. The British, who had once supported her, began to distance themselves as her local support evaporated. In the end, Ahebi's attempt to control the spiritual domain led to her political downfall. Her power waned and she was increasingly isolated. Yet, even in her decline, she was determined to control her own narrative and legacy. Knowing that the traditional burial rites for a woman were vastly different and less prestigious than those for a male king, Ahebi did something utterly unprecedented. She planned and orchestrated her own funeral while she was still alive. She wanted to ensure she would be buried with the full honors of a king, not as an ordinary woman. She held a magnificent funeral celebration for herself, with all the pomp and ceremony befitting a powerful ruler. She supervised the rituals, the feasting, and the tributes, making sure her departure from the world would be on her own terms. It was her final act of defiance, her last assertion of her unique identity as a female king. When she finally passed away around 1948, she was buried as she had commanded. Her life story became a legend, a cautionary tale for some, a story of inspiration for others. Ahebi Ugbabe's story is a powerful reminder of the complex ways in which individuals navigate and challenge the systems of power that surround them. She was a woman who refused to be a victim, who seized opportunities where others saw only obstacles. She broke gender barriers, accumulated immense power, and ruled as a king in a world dominated by men. Her legacy is complicated, a blend of shrewd politics, radical ambition, and cultural rebellion. She was both a collaborator with a colonial power and a revolutionary who shattered the traditions of her own people. Today, her story is being rediscovered, recognized as a vital piece of Nigerian and women's history. Ahebi Ugbabe wasn't just a queen. She was a king, a political strategist, and a cultural icon who carved her own path and forced the world to see her not for her gender, but for her power. Her life challenges us to rethink our assumptions about gender, leadership, and the ways history is made. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the life of one of Africa's most remarkable rulers. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for more hidden histories from around the world. We'll see you in the next video.